Hi, I'm Bob Moss, Chief Advancement Officer here at Church of God Ministries, but most of my adult life I have been a pastor, and during that time I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of church boards, and I'm talking to you today as a church board about pastoral compensation. The Church of God Ministries has been blessed to receive the CARE Initiative grant from the Lilly Endowment, and from that grant we've been able to produce a book about pastoral compensation. I hope that you'll order one of these for each one of your board members, because it's an important way for us to learn how we can better compensate the pastors across the Church of God. Today I want to talk a little bit about parsonage allowance, or housing allowance as it's otherwise known. This is a term that has been created by the IRS to help to shelter our pastors from some unnecessary tax burden. And I hope you as a board would want to shelter your pastor from unnecessary taxes. For the purpose of this illustration, let me use the idea of two pastors who live in the same community. Pastor Jones lives in a parsonage that's owned by the church. The church not only owns the dwelling, but they provide for the heat and for all the utilities, for no taxes are paid on church-owned property, and they also take care of all the repairs and upkeep, and there are some furnishings in the home as well. So all of this is a wonderful benefit to a pastor, for that same reason that pastors' cash compensation is much lower than Pastor Smith, who lives across town. Now, Pastor Smith does not live in a church-owned parsonage, but must provide his or her own dwelling. And so that incurs quite considerable cost. And now the government has provided for a way to create equity between these two pastors. By creating a parsonage allowance or housing allowance, that amount of the income can be exempt from income tax, as long as the church board designates the amount in advance of the budget year. So let me give you an illustration that might help you a little bit. Let's say that the church intends to pay Pastor Smith $60,000 salary. Now, keep in mind that if the intention is to pay that kind of salary, that pastor is viewed as self-employed by the IRS and therefore must pay 15.3% of that income in Social Security tax. That would be $9,180, or it would take the buying power down to under $51,000. You can see why it's important then to shelter the remainder from unnecessary taxes. So since the government has allowed certain percent to be tax exempt, the church board could designate in this manner. $35,000 is considered base salary, and $25,000 would be considered housing allowance. Now, as the year comes to a close, the pastor begins to add up all of the expenses incurred through the year for living in that dwelling. The list of expenses that are qualified can easily be found in this compensation manual, as well as on the Servant Solutions website, and even in the IRS publications. Of this $25,000, I made some arbitrary numbers just for the sake of illustration. So let's say from that $25,000 housing allowance, $13,000 is spent for mortgage and real estate taxes. $2,500 is spent for utilities through the year. $1,000 for repairs and upkeep. $500 for supplies, and $1,000 for furnishings and decoration. That adds up to $18,000. Now, what happens to the other $7,000? That becomes taxable, and that is added back to the taxable income. But you'll notice it's still $42,000 of taxable income rather than $60,000. That's quite a savings in income tax. Not in Social Security, but in income tax. I hope that you find this helpful. I hope that you'll utilize this very, very important tax exemption for your pastor. God bless you.